Hey guys, what's going on? We are in the Chase studio here with Chris Fitzgerald, director of Behind the Cards. What's going on, Chris? How you doing?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Anytime. Your folks at Behind the Cards, the social media team, they reached out to me. Now I'm not sure if that's you or if you do have some people doing that for you, but they did reach out to me. So it was kind of a slow process. I felt bad, but we're finally got you on here and excited to have you and talk about the movie.
Yeah, all good. I had them reach out for me because I definitely wanted to connect with you guys and let them do the back end work on social with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Awesome.
glad we can finally get that done, and we'll make sure that we share it, of course, on the David Adams stuff, and maybe we could share it on Who's Behind the Card as well.
Sounds good.
All right, great. Well, you know what? I think there's only thing one left to do. Let's get into it. First thing that I have written down here, we got some questions for you. Uh, what was it about this topic that piqued your interest enough that you wanted to direct and write an entire feature film around it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, just like a lot of other individuals, I collected when I was young. My dad actually helped run a card shop. So a lot of vintage I'm used to as a young age. My dad actually was collecting the 1968 Topps baseball set. So, that era of players I got into. But just like everyone else, I grew up and moved on and stopped collecting for a little bit. And then during quarantine, I moved from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and we were in a suburb area, and the wife wanted Paula Fitzgerald wanted to go to Target, and I went with her, and I saw a box. I think it was a box of 19 Prism, like a blaster box of Zion's year. And the next week we went back, and I went with her, and there was no cards, and I'm like, this is weird. Like, is it quarantine? Maybe the distributor just isn't doing their thing of getting cards out from Panini and Topps. Went back third week, and there was no cards again. There was maybe like a couple of Topps Heritage boxes. So I went online. I actually hit a Zion Prism out of that blaster. I went on, saw what that was going for, and I was like, wow, that's pretty expensive at the time for a $20 box of cards. And started doing a lot of research online. And then I joined eBay, started selling some cards for boxes that I got. And one day the wife saw me come downstairs with like 20 packages of cards to send to mail off. And she was like, what's going on? You used to sell one or two cards. Now you're selling 20 on eBay a day. And I started telling her what was going on in this marketplace. And she was like, this sounds like a movie. And we were like, you know what? This does sound like a movie. So we decided to spend the next 6 months just really understanding the marketplace, the movers and shakers, and what was really going on to see if we could really have enough content for a full feature film documentary. And that all happened the back half of 2020. And then we put the team together in early 2021 and started interviewing in April of 2021. So that's how it all came together.
So I think that's interesting for two reasons that you said there is one, I want to know, is your background like, schooling, your degree, is it in film studies? What was this a hobby or was this something that you actually studied? And two,
Yeah.
what are maybe some of those things when it comes to filmmaking that people don't realize that happens behind the scenes, like how far out you had to study and how far out you had to start doing the interviews?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't even own a TikTok account to put in the perspective of content. I had actually went to school for architecture, got out during the housing crash. So I went away from that. I actually own an HR company as my main business. And then my wife actually created a technology company that went public a couple of years ago. So we're more in the tech business side of aspects. And we saw essentially Paula saw a need for content during quarantine that was more of a feature film because not a lot of studios were putting out content. So that's kind of why we started a distribution company from that side. And we looked at it from a pure business standpoint up front of, okay, if we're going to do this and we don't film ourselves, what do we need to do? We need to go out and find the best production team, right? Possible. Those individuals that are just working on high-end film. So our cinematographer worked on one of the Batman movies, the second to last one. One of our executive producers that helped with production worked on Jason Bourne and not a great movie of Mall Cop, Paul Blart Mall Cop 2, and some other films like that. So we went out and got a really good group of team together, and made us, really a real film enthusiastic. So from a director standpoint, from my end, not directing any movies in the past, my passion for car, because call me a car junkie. I love to rip wax anytime, anywhere. So, being able to understand that content and the passion there really helped me throughout the film, make this what it should be.
Love hearing that. It's very interesting to hear, your first film, uh, but also your love for the hobby. My question regarding the film, can you give us a little rundown of what the film's going to be like and what will this movie present to the hobby?
Yeah, great question. And as a director, I'll answer it this way. And I'll start with, I wanted to create a documentary that really looked at the card market from the perspective of how do we get more collectors into it, right? So a lot of this stuff from a documentary standpoint, it's about the past. So a lot of us collectors already know about what's going to happen in the movie, but you're going to reminisce about what happens. And I really wanted to pull in new collectors. So how do we 2x the amount of individuals in this, right? And that's through a featured film that gets out there and showcases what this is all about. So when you look at the card, market over 2017 to 2020, it really became a secondary asset to collect cards, right, in a physical form, just like secondary assets like crypto, NFTs, sneakers, stuff like that. So we were able to take that and say, okay, this unregulated industry that's moving very fast, usually month to month changes. How do we put this in a linear perspective to showcase what new people coming in, give them the knowledge and a linear path to really understand how to go out and invest? Because the last thing we want to do as the card collecting community is have someone go out and buy a $2,000 box of cards and make 40 bucks out of it and then just give up and leave, right? So it's my goal as a director to give that linear path to say, okay, at the end of this, I'm going to go research, the companies in it, or I'm just going to do my own research to find out where I fit in the community out there. So for instance, Leighton Sports Cards, a great online breaker, was part of the movie. They have a kid-friendly zone, right? They don't cuss and do things like that. Other things that may not be kid-friendly on their breaks. They're a great place if you love that style of community and you have kids that you want to watch breaks with, right? So just pointing people in the right direction so that they just don't come in, spend money, and leave. Like the goal is, how do we get someone to come in and stay 30 to 50 years in the space that we love?
That's a great point. You talk about getting more collectors involved, after seeing the film. You've seen examples of, Drive to Survive with F1. You've seen The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. His products rose. Derek Jeter, the captain, his merch and memorabilia rose. Are you hoping to maybe get the same type of effect from this film?
Definitely. I think we're actually dropping this at a good time as well, right? Because we've seen some fluctuation in price just because the stock market's fluctuated, everything's kind of fluctuated, right? So I'm hoping that this is a great time of the year where people can become collectors. It's right before the holidays, so hopefully when they become collectors, maybe they give gifts during Christmas out, right? And we see an uptick across the board in the card market, definitely.
Yeah, so as Chris was saying there, I just want to let everybody know that this is dropping November 18th. We'll talk about that a little later in the interview as well, but you will find Behind the Cards November 18th. We'll make sure that we reiterate that toward the end. Chris, for my side of things, you talk about how you don't even have a TikTok account, but hobby content is growing every day, and there's hobby content in all kinds of forms. So where do you think the feature film side of things fit in? Do you think this is something that will have a pioneering idea here? And obviously we know that Netflix is going to be making a hobby centric movie. Do you think we're going to see more of these long form pieces?
Yeah, and I think Deadline last month put out that Adam Sandler might be doing a movie on sports cards as well with Netflix potentially. So in general, this is a hot time for feature films to come out. And I think that shows us as card collectors where the community is heading in the future, because there is some questions with individuals right now is where is it going in terms of growth? And I think that when you see large feature films being made, the industry is strong. And I think from our point of view and from me as a director, I actually left it really open in terms of the way that you will interpret the movie in terms of the card market. We actually have in each section, for instance, if you think about modern cards versus vintage and how you collect those, right? We have individuals that are very strong on modern cards. We have some that are very strong on vintage. We have them explain why on both ends. We don't tell you which one's better. We allow you to decide based on that knowledge within the film. And what happens, I think, from our documentary is you watch it and you go watch all those other contents creators in the card market space that you just mentioned are popping up, so that individuals get infused very quickly through social media or YouTube channels or podcasts. That's our main goal.
Now, I was curious about this because we've talked a lot about the good side of the hobby and everything. Were there any people in the film, collectors, that had any negative takes or opinions or just things that they said on the film that were like, whoa, like I can't believe they just said that?
Yeah, you'll see a lot of different perspectives where you'll be like, wow, or I can't believe that just happened, or why would he say that? And that's part of the emotional effect to the movie, right? As a card collector, Vegas Dave is in our film, and in the card community, you either love or you hate Vegas Dave, one or the other, right? Just because of how he positions himself as the one that called the boom of the market in 17 and the crash coming in 2021, right? So you see that happening in our film and how he perceives how the market's moving in the future. And then, but like I mentioned, as a director, I didn't want to push the film in one way or another, and I wanted the audience to decide. So we have individuals like Vegas Dave, and then we have individuals like Jeff Wilson and Rob Go, and talking about how healthy the market is and where it's going to. So you actually get to see both perspectives of what goes on in terms of each section of our movie. And we just let you decide once you leave where's the market going? Would you rather collect, vintage versus modern, or what grading card company should I use, or should I not even grade cards, right? It's going to be really fascinating, not just from a new user perspective in the card collecting community, but you as a card collector yourself, you'll either appreciate what's being said or you'll reminisce about it in certain areas, or you'll have that, wow, I can't believe Vegas Dave just said that moment as well.
So obviously that being that being the path that you want to take for the people who are going to be viewing this film, but for you doing the interviews and through that process, was there anything that you learned about cards or the hobby in general, even though you had that, let's call it somewhat basic knowledge or just knowledge of the hobby yourself?
Yeah, so when I started filming this, it was getting to the point where I was about a year into investing again, and I was really a card addict at the point where I was just ripping any box I could find, because you couldn't find a box, right? So I was even ripping some Topps Heritage and stuff like that from a retail perspective, and not really knowing what I was doing from that end, I would say. I just wanted to do it, right, because of the time frame that we lived in. So once I got into these individuals like Rob Go, Steve Aoki, Jeff Wilson, Joe Davis, individuals that were collecting high-end or mid-tier cards, I started to understand a little bit more that I shouldn't just rip every box. I should focus on certain brands. I should also not grade every single base rookie that I was doing. I was subbing thousands of cards to PSA that year. So fast forward through all of that, now I'm a baseball guy. So I actually started collecting some basketball and football during this time as well, as I learned more about that, because as a collector, you're usually in one space or one team, right? One player. So I do more basketball and football, like Mahomes and some GOATs out there collecting, than I used to, as I usually focus on baseball, Bowman prospects and stuff like that. And now I look at essentially moving forward into where I know now I'm really focused on numbered cards, whether that's like Bowman first or the second or third year, really looking at those oranges out of 25, the golds out of 50, and really focused on numbered cards moving forward of players I think are going to be great.
Now, I know you mentioned certain names, one specifically being Steve Aoki. Hearing Aoki in the trailer, he said he's turned down pretty much all interviews relating to sports cards. How did you manage to get him on board with your project?
Yeah, great question. It took an army behind the scenes to do that. So we knew that we wanted Steve Aoki in the film, and we knew he was going to be really hard to get a hold of. My wife, Paula Fitzjarrald, she's the executive producer and also the casting director, and she really knows how to identify and get a hold of anyone in the world. Is essentially one of her great kind of things that she does. But she knew that just reaching out cold to them wasn't going to work. So we actually started filming first, getting to the cast that we knew Steve, really making them buy in after our interview, knowing that this was going to be a great project, getting an intro to Steve from them. And it took us 6 intros with Steve until we finally got in front of the team to really propose what we're doing and set an interview time with them. So it definitely took quite a while. And what's interesting is we caught him perfect timing. 2 days after we interviewed him, he went back on tour because like the COVID and everything started moving, and he kind of disappeared from Vegas. So we got really lucky that we caught him in that time span. But he was only the second hardest person to get a hold of. The first person was a guy named Chris. He's actually one of the Excel distributors for merchandising, putting stuff on the, stocking the shelves at Target and Walmart. Think about trying to find one of those guys to be in the film. You don't know who those guys are. They don't put out content. They don't collect cards, right? So that was actually the toughest guy outside of Steve.
What kind of hoops did you feel like you had to jump through, to get that guy? Because I mean, that's other people, you can reach out directly to them or through their people. But I got to imagine something like Target and that there was probably a chain of command that you ended up having to go through.
Yeah, we actually, took one film internal of Target at the time because of COVID policies. So we essentially had to film everyone on site, and I didn't want any external interviews like virtual like this, right? So because it was gonna be a feature film, so I felt like it was necessary to do it in person. So we couldn't get anyone local to Vegas. It was very hard here. They put out cards at 7, 8 when the shop opens at Target or Walmart at 7 a.m. The card's already out, so it's not like we can run into that vendor. I actually had my mom in Tampa, Florida, find out when one of the vendor spots at a Target was going to be available for a certain time frame, and she stood out there for an hour until this guy showed up, explained to him what we were doing, FaceTimed me, and we were able to convince him to join us when we were down in Tampa videoing. So that's pretty wild. That's how it came out.
So shout out to Mama Fitzgerald right there for being a foot
Shout out to
soldier and
Mama.
putting in the work.
The things that parents do for their kids.
That's pretty unbelievable. So you got a good cast of people, but based on the clips and the trailer that we've seen. But I don't know if you're at liberty to say. I totally understand if you can't. But was there anybody that you tried, tackling, tried to get for the movie, and it just didn't end up working out, or anybody you couldn't get?
Yeah, so we interviewed a lot of individuals up front because we wanted to make sure that we knew for each category what we needed to put in. So, for instance, when it comes to grading, at the time, the top 2 were by far PSA and Beckett, right? BGS. So, from a grading perspective and casings. So we actually talked with PSA and BGS. We actually chose Beckett just because they had a history of the pricing guides and everything like that as well. So bringing more just culture out into the film outside of the actual grading side, because we wanted everyone to speak across the entire film about different things, right? So we couldn't do certain individuals that were in that area. Phil's pulls. I don't know if you guys know Phil from he was an ex-Yankees pitcher, and he actually he does card breaks, right? Yeah, you know him. So we tried to get him. He was the one guy that I really wanted because I liked what he was doing from just showcasing what an actual box comes with and stuff like that. We couldn't make that happen. I think he had a newborn just at the time or coming, and it was COVID, so it was just very hard. We ended up not doing California, so that kind of hurt that chance as well for us. But we just had to make decisions based on, who's going to be best in the film across each section is how we narrowed it down.
Speaking of people that you had on the movie, we noticed an athlete by the name of Josh Jacobs, big time running back for the Raiders. No big deal. He was kind of learning the process of cards. Can you talk about what it was like being able to educate him a little bit more on the hobby?
Yeah, it was fun interviewing him. And first, the reason why we chose Josh Jacobs is because I saw a niche of running backs and wide receiver pricing going up in stock for the rookie cards, where everyone just focused on quarterbacks in the past. So we felt like it was a good time to really showcase a running back instead of a quarterback. He also was like top 10 in jersey sales. So he did a few Visa commercial, he did a Kia commercial. So in general, he was just out there in the world outside of just being a running back. But it was really interesting. We got 1 hour with him. That's literally all we could have up front. But he was so enthusiastic about the card market, and in the film, he saw, we put his graded Beckett cards in front of him, and he was like, "Do the cards come in this case?" And so I said, "No, it's a Beckett case." And I started telling him what grading is, and then so it was a different kind of interview with him, because it was almost like my teaching side came out and wanted him to join the hobby more than what he was already doing, right? So all of a sudden, we got to the hour and I only asked like 3 or 4 questions, and luckily they gave us 1 more hour. So he loved it so much, he gave us extra time. What's interesting too is, he doesn't have kids. I don't even know if he has a girlfriend, but he is already collecting his own rookie cards for his future kids. That's really unique, right? You see Mike Trout come out this year and does investing, and it's, he just had a kid. Josh Jacobs doing that pre-kid. I mean, that's how much he's involved in having this, card space join his family for the future. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I feel like athletes getting into this stuff can honestly only help, because you see guys like fellow NFL running back AJ Dillon kind of doing the same thing. I don't know what his situation is, but him collecting his cards. But not only that, I feel like he's collecting teammates' cards or friends of his in the league. But I think that's just great to see athletes doing that, and can only make the hobby stronger, because maybe you do get those casuals who are like, well, if Mike Trout's doing it, I want to do it too.
Right. Yeah, and like Rob Go is in our film, and he bought the Mickey Mantle card that set that record, right? And he talks in our film about how some of his wealthy friends that buy paintings and stuff like that are starting to buy cards. But he thinks the most interesting spot is when athletes come in to the space, because not only will they collect their own cards, but to your point, they'll collect others. And whoever they're collecting, they're playing against a lot of times that they're collecting modern cards, right? So they really have an understanding in the community of that sport, who you should be collecting as well, right? So it's really interesting when athletes come in. I kind of track to see who they're collecting outside of themselves, because I think that's going to be a mover moving forward, because they think, wow, I played against this guy and he might only be in the league for 2 or 3 years, but based on me playing defense against him, I think he's going to be a star in the future, right? That's really cool to see, from that perspective.
You can almost say athletes are influencers,
Mm-hmm.
because
Absolutely,
because you look at some
Agree.
influencers that are in our hobby now, and people base their trends and what they do off of the influencers that they follow. And like you were saying, if you see Mike Trout collecting whatever, people are going to be like, "Oh, Mike Trout's doing it. Why aren't I doing it?"
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
but moving forward a little bit, obviously, you got the first film coming out Friday. Would you ever do a follow up to this movie? Maybe with different aspects to the hobby.
Yeah, great question. And I'll start with, since I was so new at directing, I probably made every interviewer stay an hour to 3 hours longer than I should have. So our content is deep from the individuals that we have. I literally could have made 2 documentaries by separating the individuals we had with the content we had already. But the card the card market moves monthly. And I knew this going into it. So for instance, Fanatics didn't buy Tops at the time, but there was word on the street that they would. So for that section, when we talk about licensing in the card market, we talk about the past, how, who Upper Deck had, Flair, Don Russ, and then how that was bought by Panini, and then where it's at today, so that when people see that Fanatics owns it, they just understand that it changes regularly, right? So individuals like Fanatics, we would go after, right, for the next film. So we need to see how this one does from the feature film. It's in select theaters on Friday, November 18th. It's on demand on Apple TV for those that don't have it in the theater, in their location for theaters, that they can go online and actually view it. And, we're going to see how this turns out, and we'll see if we make a second one. But there's so many individuals in the card market space that belong in a documentary. like this that we could target for the next one if we definitely do a second one.
Yeah, and you bring up such things as fanatics buying tops, not necessarily was a thing when you were shooting, but is now. So for someone who's on one side of the camera directing, but also on the other side of things in terms of selling cards and that being a part of the hobby, how do you feel about where it's going? This current trend that's going to happen probably in the next probably say 3 years.
Yeah, and I kind of alluded to that in my question earlier. I think the market overall is extremely healthy. I think we're getting to a point where you don't necessarily grade base cards. Base cards are increasing every year in terms of print runs at this point. So I think the market's going to shift to really focusing as an investor side on the number cards, whether that's not just first year, rookie year, but second, third year. Like in basketball, everyone's chasing the golds out of 10, right? So you want to kind of go where the marketplace is going in the future, and from there make sure that you're collecting responsibly with the dollars that you have. So I think the market's healthy, but we stay away from certain things out there in the marketplace right now.
Well said. All right, Chris. Well, usually to wrap it up in our interviews, what we want to do is, I know you kind of gave people an idea where they can see the film on Friday. But is there anything fun you guys are going to be doing leading up to it in terms of promotion? And, where is the social media? Where can people follow you and, find different things about the film?
Yeah, so we actually are doing a really cool Instagram live break with Steve Aoki and Josh Jacobs Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Pacific time. So join one of our 3 Instagrams to check that out. We're breaking 2017 first off the line football. So chasing those big Mahomes hits. And we're also, Josh will be doing the 2019 chasing his own from there. And then you can find us on @Who's Behind the Card on Instagram. And you can also, go to Apple TV on demand, and you can pre-order if you want to watch Friday or after.
We're gonna be snowed in Buffalo more than likely Friday, so
Yep.
we're gonna need something to watch Friday, just to kind of chill in the house, get some popcorn ready, and Behind the Card is the thing that we should watch.
Yeah, so basically you guys out there that may also have a snow day and be impacted by the weather, a great snow day movie you can check out November 18th. Check out Behind the Card. Director Chris Fitzjarrald joined us this afternoon. So Chris, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and good luck with everything on the movie, and we can't wait to see what comes next.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Love the chase, and keep doing what you guys are doing in the hobby as well. Appreciate being on here.
Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.